Там було перше поранення кульові, і ворог потім трошки закидав мене гранатою.
In the heart of one of the fiercest battles of the conflict in Ukraine, a soldier is cornered under relentless Russian fire. All around him there is only chaos. There is no safe haven in this hell. His name, Woody, a soldier of the 12th Azov Special Forces Brigade. 5 grenades roll towards his exact location, shaking the ground and the Ukrainian forest with deafening explosions. Woody's comrades in the distance see him surrounded by enemy fire and leave him for dead. But in war, fate is as uncertain as it is deadly. In this new video from Military Force, we will explore all the details of the fierce battle between a member of the Ukrainian army against deadly Russian contenders. A testimony that springs from the very depths of the bloodiest war in recent times. Let's begin.
Зліва підари стараються пройти. Зліва замішаний рух. Ротний їм, Олі, до мене. Граната. Давай. Давай, блядь.
Since February 24th, 2022, when Russia unleashed its brutal invasion of Ukraine, local forces have resisted against all odds in one of the most devastating conflicts in modern history. Many citizens who had never thought of taking up arms changed their minds after the start of the war. Woody had just graduated in film production, and the conflict initially prompted him to get involved in creating documentaries to tell stories about what was happening in his country. However, he decided that he must first fulfill his duty in the war before dedicating himself to his passion. When the conflict broke out, he felt he had to act. He joined the Territorial Defense Forces and later found a place in the Azov Brigade. We are talking about an elite Ukrainian unit that has captured global attention for its relentless resistance against Russian forces. Born in 2014 as a volunteer battalion to defend Ukraine, it quickly transformed into one of the most feared and admired units in the country. Comprised of highly trained soldiers, the Azov Brigade has been instrumental in some of the toughest and most decisive battles since the start of the Russian invasion. Although its history has been shrouded in controversy over its origins and symbolism, the unit has established itself as a key pillar in the defense of Ukraine, earning a reputation for courage, discipline, and ferocity on the battlefield. Woody, a squad member of the Azov Brigade, gives an intensely personal perspective of his experience in combat and the war in Ukraine. Let's hear it in his own words.
Ворог постійно нас активно обстрілював. В плані артилерії розпочинав якісь штурмові дії. Навички знадобились з самого початку. Це там умовна топографія, щоб не заблукати в цьому лісі і так далі. Нас штурмували опонент, і ми ганяли між позиціями, приносили БК, допомагали пацанам, там когось розставляли по позиціям.
Woody was motivated by the prospect of being surrounded by soldiers with a strong sense of purpose. One comment from a fellow soldier left a deep impression on him. It's not hard to kill a person. What's hard is to save their life and health. Woody took courses in drones, medicine, radio communications, and increased his physical training to become a better soldier. He knew what awaited him once he was on active duty with the fierce 12th Azov Special Forces Brigade. In the middle of a dense forest, his squad was tasked with a strategic position to hold off the Russian advance. Woody received a radio order to support a nearby unit that was being assaulted by enemy forces.
Я сказав окей, зібрав невелику групу, взяли БК, висунулись. Коли ми висунулись, ми зрозуміли, що опонент досить близько підійшов, зайняв там некомфортні позиції і почав трошки напрягати спекача кулеметом. Типу надавати нашим хлопцям підійти резервам або евакуацію провести і тому подібне.
This was a crucial moment. The 12th Brigade team had been ordered to cover their comrades as they advanced through the woods. Woody, as a member of the squad, decided to go forward, a risky maneuver and outside of tactical protocol. However, he was convinced that he would take responsibility if they made a mistake. He understood that to regain control, they would have to counterattack. With no time to hesitate, he gathered his team together and quickly developed a plan. Thanks to his prior knowledge of the terrain, he was able to outline a clear strategy. They would advance, clearing positions one by one. However, the enemy was closer than they thought.
Обстрілювали, потім почали працювати FPV по нашим позиціям. До нас прийшла група інша і розпочався такий досить масштабний штурм наших позицій зі сторони опонента. На той момент мій командир взводу відділення, вони були 300, вони їх вивели з позицій.
The intense fighting cornered the squad. The fierce roar of the Russian artillery shook off the Ukrainian advance attempts. Woody had to assume a leadership position when his superiors were wounded. It is in these moments that it is crucial to remain calm. After his platoon leaders were evacuated, Woody decided to take the initiative, organizing the soldiers into their positions, distributing supplies, and making sure that everything was ready to face the danger that lurked at every turn.
АГС, говорю, уши открой, нахуй!
Підар, вилазь!
Вот батарейка лежит на земле. Вау!
Типи вам це пізда!
АГС!
Нас не убій, долбойоби!
Днепр на...
Всіх вас нахуй!
Днепр!
During these times, under relentless Russian attack, Woody's strategy was to move in a coordinated and rapid manner, making sure each position was cleared before moving forward.
Подходи. Сейчас. Давай, наебашу. Раз, два, три. Пизда. Блядь!
Woody and his team tried to hold out. His unit was supported by mortars, which fired at the Russian positions. This created enough of a distraction for the Ukrainian group to move into the trenches without being immediately detected by the enemy.
По тій позиції, де був опонент, працював міномет. І ми почали рух, просувались. Підійшли до позиції, зачистили перше укриття, зачистили друге укриття. Ворог трохи відсунувся. Я в двійці працював з побратимом. Ми зайшли трошки на брустер, щоб прикрити групу, яка буде рухатись по траншеї, через те, що там траншея, ну, вона прям така неприємна, щоб там працювати, і пацанів треба було прикрити. Ми встали, почали працювати.
That trench maneuver was essential to allow the group to continue its advance without being decimated by the enemy. The brigade was facing the Russian soldiers directly. This was no longer a training exercise where everything was simulated and controlled. Here they were facing real soldiers with a desire to kill. Woody realized how shocking it was to have gone from a practice to a real situation where there were no inanimate targets, but soldiers seeking to end his life. At this point in the battle, Woody and his group had cleared several positions and managed to establish partial control over the area. The fighting continued, but his team had managed to gain ground and neutralize the immediate threats. Every minute of combat was a test of leadership, courage, and tactical skill for the Ukrainian soldier, who, despite not being the original leader of the squad, assumed responsibility at a critical moment. As this brave soldier advanced through the rough and desolate terrain, the chaos of the battle raged more and more around him. The intensity of the battle drove him forward, blinded by the dust and smoke that rose in columns. Every step he took seemed to take him further away from his comrades, and soon the figure of his squad vanished in the fog of conflict. Unwittingly, Woody found himself alone with the roar of gunfire and the scream of explosions enveloping him in a symphony of despair.
Я був відірваний від групи, не був впевнений, де саме вони знаходяться. Якби я з ними сконтактував, ворог би скоріше мене добив би, плюс у мене радійка, вони б забрали радійку, така собі ситуація.
In the chaos, Woody was wounded. With a faltering effort, he looked down to see the damage. Most of it was in his legs, but a small piece of shrapnel had lodged in his shoulder, and another, more alarmingly, in his head. He feared the worst. His comrades took it as a 200, a cold number indicating death. Woody had fallen into the enemy's sights. Russian forces concentrated fire on him.
І ворог просто заакцентував увагу на мені, тому що подумав, скоріш за все, подумав, що там знаходиться більшість групи, або вся група знаходиться там. І відкрив спочатку зі стрілкотні, зі стрілкового озброєння по мені вогонь. І там було перше поранення кульові, і потім трошки закидав мене гранатами.
The air grew heavy and time seemed to stop as Woody heard a sharp whistle approaching. He looked up, and, in fractions of a second, everything sped up. He saw the metallic silhouettes of 5 grenades falling in slow motion, spinning in space as if fate itself had sent them to finish him off. The dull sound of the previous explosion still echoed in his head. But at that moment, a terrifying silence enveloped him. The ground shook beneath his bloody hands as his instinct took over. This is it, he thought, but his body didn't give up. He threw himself to the ground, trying to make himself small. The grenades fell one after another, shaking the earth around him, raising dust and debris that covered him like a suffocating cloud. The first explosion stunned him. The ringing in his ears was deafening. Fragments of shrapnel pierced his shoulder and head. He felt the pain like lightning coursing through his body. But he had no time to stop. Smoke, blood, and dust mixed in his blurry vision. For a second, he thought of his team, of his comrades who already believed he was dead. But he couldn't go down there, not yet. With a defiant smile that even he didn't understand, he prepared himself for whatever. Amidst the deafening chaos and confusion of the battlefield, Woody looked up and saw an eagle majestically soaring through the sky. Its presence, almost unreal in the tumult of war, became a symbol of resilience and dignity. As bullets whizzed and explosions shook the ground, the bird flew with a serene calm, as if untouched by conflict. Woody, wounded and exhausted, watched this eagle. The image burned itself into his mind, reminding him that even in the abyss of war, there was a beauty and dignity that persisted. No one in his platoon expected to see him alive. Woody checked his wounds quickly and, despite the pain, refused to give up and began to crawl across the terrain to avoid being captured or shot down. He was ready to move on, aware that this could be his last chance. Every move Woody made exposed him to the risk of detection. The tension in the air was palpable. Every rustle of branches or whisper of the wind could be his undoing. Despite the imminent danger, Woody maintained a superhuman calm, aware that any radio communication could betray his location to enemy forces. In the stillness of his strategy, every breath was measured. His mind, sharp and focused, understood that at that moment, silence was his only defense against certain death.
До своїх почала працювати радійка, коли я до них повз. Чую по радійці, кажуть Вуді 200, Вуді 200, і зв'язок типу пропадає. Я виходжу на зв'язок, кажу всім абонентам, це Вуді, я 300, повзу на вас з такої-то позиції на таку-то, зустрічайте.
With great effort, the soldiers reunited with Woody. They examined him quickly and with concern. They gave him first aid, hastily applying bandages while trying to stop the bleeding. Despite the pain and the critical situation, Woody remembered this moment as if it were a movie, with the sun shining and him smiling despite being wounded. After they provided him with first aid on the ground, his team still could not evacuate him, as they were in the middle of a firefight. They spent 3 hours under fire before they could regroup. Meanwhile, reinforcements were advancing from the depths of the forest, step by step, clearing the enemy positions. When the situation finally seemed under control, the squadron carried out one last heroic feat. With the Russian forces weakened and the terrain clearer, the soldiers, still exhausted and wounded, faced one final challenge. With unmatched bravery, they advanced under enemy fire to secure Woody's position and evacuate him safely.
Темпейку поставим. Братанчик! Як себе почуваєш? Зрозумів.
Ми готові.
Все, погнали. Іду.
They managed to get Woody off the battlefield through barriers and constant enemy fire to a safer position. From there, he was evacuated in an armored vehicle, where he was treated with basic medical care. Woody understood that war is not a sprint, but a marathon, and each person contributes in their own way. This soldier has expressed his special gratitude for the support received and discovered that, despite the difficulties and the power of the enemy, it is essential to continue giving one's best. These examples of resilience inspire us to continue forward. Motivation should never fade in the face of the atrocities that this country faces. After living through a situation like this, it is important to carry out a sincere self-evaluation of one's own performance and effectiveness in any role. If one is fulfilling oneself optimally, that is a good sign. If not, it is crucial to identify ways to improve one's contribution to the common goal. Even if one is not in charge of a specific task, it is always possible to contribute from another place. The next step may be terrifying, but it is crucial for the fight to continue. Determination and effort are essential to confront Putin.
Ого! Подышал.
So, the time has come to say goodbye. We invite you to subscribe to the channel to find out about new videos about the war between Ukraine and Russia. Thank you very much for staying with us until the end. We look forward to seeing you again in our next installment of Military Force. See you next time.